About 2 or 3 years ago, we started really looking at our failure rate, and it was abysmal. And we had a lot of student repeaters, and that was because we had students who were taking courses over that they had failed. We had about 1,300 freshmen. Normally we have somewhere between 600 and 900. That year we were exceptionally big because we had a new school that was being built and wasn't built yet. And so we decided that we really needed to do something, to look at failure and what was causing failure. And so we started by developing PLCs, using DeFore's model. And we started having teachers planning groups, so all the Algebra 1 teachers or all the English 1 teachers planning. But what we found was they were planning together, they were talking about cool activities and whatever, but then you would go into their grade book and you would have one Algebra 1 teacher who had 15 grades and one Algebra 1 teacher who had 3 grades. And it didn't really matter. You could have a high failure rate with the 3 grades or a high failure rate with the 15 grades. And so there was so much inconsistency. So we decided to go back into the PLCs and really focus on what does your grade book look like? How are you assessing students? We use a lot of sporting analogies, and one is that, a football team, for instance, or a soccer team, volleyball, anything, they're going to practice probably 4 days in a week before they play that game on Friday. And there are no points that are going on the board. They don't walk into the stadium Friday night and say, well, we made 3 touchdowns in practice, well, we made 5, put those points on the board. We all had our practice. We all got a chance to score points, get formative assessment, get feedback, make corrective actions, and then the real score, the real points happen at the game on Friday. And so we've asked our teachers to arrange their grade books that way, that they have what we have called a 0% category, although we're trying to get away from that. It is 0% because it does not count in the weighted grade, but it does count. And when we started calling it 0%, the kids and the teachers got that sort of negative connotation of it. So we've gone to calling it the practice category, and it does count only 0%, but it is practice. And it is all the formative assessment. That's the hardest part, honestly, is getting teachers to understand the difference between formative and summative. Formative is graded, it is given back to the students, it is put in the grade book, but it just doesn't count for or against me. And so that was a little bit of a challenge, getting teachers to understand formative means feedback, formative means practice, but it is graded. And it does count, even if it's going in a 0% category. You need it. I couldn't go and play a football game on Friday if I hadn't practiced Monday through Thursday. So we have to practice. It's really important. And it's really important that we know how we did. And not just the 100 check. That's another challenge that I have sometimes is teachers want to just put those 100%. But that's really not giving a student feedback. That's a participation grade. You did it, great, but how did you do? So we've been working a lot with teachers on creating rubrics, things that they can do quickly. In that 0% category, that practice category, we ask that they do a lot of things that students grade themselves. And that practice feedback is so important for students to know where they are before they get the test. And the focus becomes on the learning. I would have to say that is the biggest plus out of this whole thing. And even the kids will say, and the teachers will say, wow, it's about the learning. They want to make sure that we learned it. And the teachers say, man, this has really unmasked kids not learning because they were doing things. They were getting the hundreds on those worksheets. And I've had other teachers say, well, our failure rate's going to be terrible because they were throwing in those little fluff grades to try to get the students to pass. And so we don't have a lot of grades in the graded categories. We ask that it look like a pyramid. And in that pyramid, the base of it is the practice. That's the 0%. Our district sets the rules for the other weighted categories. So, for instance, math and English both are 60-40. So a minor summative or a major summative assessment would be either in the 40 or the 60%. Social studies is 50-50. And science, because they do labs, is 40% labs, 40% major summative, and 20% minor summative, like more of a quiz or something like that. So we ask that teachers, the bulk of what it goes in their grade book is going to be in the 0%. We ask that they have 1 to 2 graded assignments per week, but they can go anywhere. So this week I might only do practice. So I practice 2 times, and those both go in the 0% category, but in the grade book. And more than likely the students have graded those themselves, so they've got that feedback instantly. Then the next week, let's say I take a quiz and maybe work my way up to a project or something, then those would go in those weighted categories. But by the time they get done, we want a minimum of 1 to 2 grades in the grade book. We're not going to set a maximum. I mean, if they wanted to take a practice grade every day, they could, especially if the students are grading them. The other thing that we do in our grade books is we ask teachers to label every assignment exactly the same in the weighted categories. The practice, it's their own, so they can do whatever they want to with it. But every grade book label has to have 2 components. The first one is it has to be the concept that they're teaching. So if they're teaching slope of a line, then it'll say slope of a line. And then the second piece of the assignment title is what it was. Was it a worksheet? Was it a quiz? Was it notes? Was it research? They even put those things in the 0% category. So if they're asking students to take notes, then they'll check that the student took notes, and they'll put slope of a line notes and give them a grade for that they actually did it. What I try to tell teachers is that this should have a huge impact on their time, but a positive impact on their time, because they should be spending less time grading, because students are doing a lot of the practice grading. They're only grading a few assessments, which means that their assessments should be better because they have more time to write them. And it means their lessons should be better because all that time that they were spending grading, now they can spend focusing on planning and doing good quality lessons every day. The focus of this whole thing, the point of the whole thing, is that we have to know, especially within a course, that they learned it. It's not about what grade they get, but have they learned it, yes or no? At the end of the day, when I look at a student's grades in a course, I want to know, do you know the material or not? And that's what the grade book should tell me. Not did you do the work or not, but do you know it or not?